7 Days to Die is a first-person zombie horde survival base-building game from indie development studio The Fun Pimps. In development for over 10 years, this game has gone through a lot of iterations. This review covers gameplay, mechanics, enemies, weapons, graphics, the history of the game, and plans for the game going forward. 7 Days to Die began as a Kickstarter campaign and was released in its original alpha form in 2013. The core concept seemed to be Minecraft, but for adults, and much of the original premise is still visible in the most recent alpha. The game was initially very well received, and enthusiastic gamers voted it to be greenlit on Steam. The Fun Pimps first published through Telltale Games, but it was reacquired by the Fun Pimps after Telltale Games shut down. The game is still technically in alpha, but its alpha is substantially more polished than most games at full release. Each alpha gives quite a lot of new features and tweaks. Currently in Alpha 21, Alpha 22 is only a few months out according to developers, and will come with a host of new game options including permadeath, new character model overhauls, new items, item skins, raiders, new NPCs, new equipment including armor suits, new zombie skins, POIs, and maps. The UI will also be receiving an overhaul to improve the game menus. While I eagerly await Alpha 22, I am in no way discouraged from playing the current build. 7 Days to Die is a well-polished, well-balanced, fun, and engaging survival game. I would recommend anyone who loves survival games to give it a try. And if you haven't played it in a while, I would suggest dusting it off and giving it another go. 7 Days to Die is a mixture of extreme violence in the form of endless zombie hordes seeking to rend your flesh and destroy your base, and standard survival resource gathering and base building. You start out in a field or on a road with a series of gathering quests, complete those quickly, make a weapon, and begin fighting your way to the nearest trader. Traders tend to be located in or near a town with several locations to build a good base. Traders also grant access to some immediate quests, and a place to trade and purchase new equipment and resources. The entire process is fluid and intuitive. Get you familiar with how the game is played very quickly. Build a tiny base and throw down a chest to hold your loot, and you are ready to go. While quest completion, exploration, combat, and looting are all well polished and fun in 7 Days to Die, the focus is clearly building up your perfect survival base. Every 7 days, a massive horde comes to rip your base apart and murder you, and each 7 day escalates in both ferocity and difficulty. This repeats until the 7th day 7, which is really the climax of the horde's intensity. Horde difficulty is based upon which biome you're in, the amount of time that has passed, and the quality of loot in your area. The higher all these values are, the more difficult the zombies you will encounter in the world. Improve your base using the skills and resources that you either find or craft. You can find resources out in the world or on quests done for traders, or you can craft these items in the crafting stations. Improve your skills with skill books you find around the world through leveling or as a reward for quests. New designs, traps, and base layouts all contribute to the survivability of you and your gathered equipment. 7 Days to Die also provides you with the opportunity to test your skills against other players. On the PvP-enabled servers, you'll have the added threat of humans working against you as you try to survive in the post-apocalypse. While most PvE servers sport a huge number of above-ground bases, with elaborate, brilliant, and sometimes fantastical designs, PvP servers appear almost entirely devoid of bases, as most players prefer to hide their assets in nearly impenetrable underground bunkers and grief one another constantly. The PvP servers have an entirely different culture and feeling, like an ANCAP fever dream or an Amazon company town. Be very careful around an above-ground PvP base. Normally they're just gigantic pointless traps with no resources to speak of. Just explosives, shotgun turrets, and false floors. Never trust another player in a PvP server, not even your friends. While PvP is fun in 7 Days to Die, the bulk of the player base seems to participate in PvE servers. Ultimately, this reveals the true focus of the game. It is a base building simulator with survival and zombie elements. Everything you do in 7 Days to Die is focused around creating your perfect post-apocalyptic horde base. It is a love letter to off-grid survivalists and doomsday preppers. 7 Days to Die gives you an enormous array of options for creating your perfect personalized base design. Sporting a sophisticated real-world physics model for building, your creations feel connected to the world around them. One of the favorite activities for players is breaking the building physics in order to produce floating bases. The arms race between the development team and the players trying to cheese a system has led to the creation of entirely new enemy types. Exploding super mutants are a catch-all for sophisticated bases designed to exploit the game's mechanics and AI. Many servers I went to have bases that transcend simple functional design and instead can only be classified as art. And construction of these bases takes time, sometimes weeks. It involves careful planning, as putting too much weight on a pillar without adequate support can result in a building collapse. Oftentimes, players end up in teams making bases, which means real-world planning, coordination, task division, and hierarchy. The construction of simulated communities in a post-apocalyptic game has always been the holy grail of the genre. With an ever-growing community, constant updates, both graphical and mechanical, and a thriving player base, 7 Days to Die seems to accomplish the impossible. The enemies in 7 Days to Die are a wide assortment of largely similar zombies that come in 4 flavors: regular, feral, irradiated, and feral irradiated. Then you have jumping, summoning, Jeff Bezos, exploding pigs, and the jihadi bodybuilders. In addition, you have animals, some zombie and some regular, with by far the most annoying being vultures. Coming up with strategies for overcoming these enemies, using their abilities against them, and protecting your bases from their attacks occupies most of your time in 7 Days to Die. Exploding zombies in particular can make short work of even the sturdiest bases and require direct intervention from the player in order to keep them from breaking all of your stuff. Outside of the 7-day horde, you will encounter most of these enemies in the forest, cities, and points of interest. Each large house or facility is essentially its own little dungeon, with enemies, traps, and guided directional indicators for how to proceed through them. The enemies inside of the POIs will often not load in until you are moving through the dungeons, which keep the servers from getting overloaded with zombies every time someone walks past a house. The dungeons themselves are a lot of fun. They seem carefully planned out, and even after figuring out where the loot room is and knowing I could just bust through a couple of walls and snatch all the best goodies, I frequently ended up running the whole dungeon just for the enjoyment of slaughtering zombies and the constant challenge of managing combat with the undead inside of an enclosed space. Every update seems to come with new POIs, and so the world grows ever more interesting as the game matures. Weapons in 7 Days to Die are the usual ones: the bow and arrow, the axe, sledgehammer, an array of guns, nothing too surprising. Every weapon is well balanced, with solid sound design and carefully calibrated timing. The wear on weapons feels almost perfect, and the spacing out of the loot stages is nicely correlated with the world's difficulty. 7 Days to Die has had a lot of time to get this right, and they've done so very carefully. Up until very late game, you always feel the difficulty increasing to meet your level, but with a slight edge to the player. Each level makes you a little bit stronger than it makes the zombies. Both the novice player and the experienced player will feel themselves getting stronger, but never being completely out of harm's way. The graphics in 7 Days to Die keep improving with every update. I've never seen any game make as many leaps forward in graphics over the life of the game. While they are once again starting to look a little dated compared to the new next-gen games, I assume based on past experience that further graphical updates will eventually be on the horizon. What is in the game is very polished and attractive. The models look amazing, especially considering the age of the game, and the atmosphere is rich and engaging. I've rarely been so terrified by a game as I was the first time I played 7 Days to Die. Absent any understanding of what I was doing, I constructed a small underground base in an older server and tried to hide from the zombies. They broke through my ceiling and my door and rained down upon me, consuming my flesh and destroying all my material possessions. Having been scared half out of my wits by the gnawing, swiping, screaming horde, I was hooked. The game had infected me and I would need to play it again.